Hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are in a wonderful setting, and when you go up those steps, if you haven't already done so, you will see that we have never been in such a magnificent setting. It's so attractive, it's absolutely perfect. And I've got nothing to do with it, so that's how I can say it's so wonderful. Second comment, I can already hear criticisms. Everyone's already saying it's going to be so hot. It's not going to be hot because we have not yet invented aircon for the outdoors. However, we've got some other solutions. We've got hydrogen, other solutions that Philippe's going to talk us about, and I think in the future we'll solve this problem. I would just like to point out in these welcoming words three things. First thing, what is going on today, tomorrow and the next day is absolutely out of the ordinary. It's not that we're out of the ordinary, it's that our event is out of the ordinary. Not only because 2 months ago we didn't think we were going to be able to pull it off for reasons which you can all imagine, health problems, all the other problems with organisation, the physical organisation, and we decided to do it come what may, and we were right. And I hope in 2.5 days' time we'll be able to say exactly the same thing. So it's also amazing because the period is really amazing. It's the 2nd of July, and you have seen that there have been a couple of problems with our elections here in France. I think some transport companies in France were going to be on strike, so we're back in the good old days, which is rather nice. However, that means that this is a time when there's been a lot of tension, frustration, a lot of discussion in our country has taken place and will continue to take place. It's very important, and I'm going to explain how we're going to try and move forward. Third comment. There are 56 sessions and debates. They are all top quality, absolutely every single one. And they have one characteristic in common. They are all focused on two main issues, two major issues that we are going to have to face because, as we know, the recovery is going to take place. I've got a lot of people from the Banque de France. I'm going to use their statistics later on. But we were at -10 last year, so let's get things into perspective here. There is going to be a second support wave, call it as you may. I don't know when it's going to be revealed. I would say the 18th of January. And of course, all of this is going to take place, and we'll all have our own problems. We will have to pick up from where we left in 2019. 2019 was a year when there were 6 million people who were either unemployed or had a bad job. 9 million people are poor in our country, and 60%, they were earning 60% of the median salary, and there is a situation which is not unusual, but that is why we have two questions. I've only got 2 minutes left to speak. We've got two questions, so a minute per question. The first one is, above and beyond the words I've been using for years, above and beyond the absolute necessity to reflect on decarbonisation of the whole world, the climate is a constraint, of course. All kinds of words are being used, and all these words need to be used. However, we're going to have to put some substance behind those words. So our first issue, and you'll be seeing this is something we're going to be talking about. There's the three of us plus Laurence Boone. So what is the capitalism of the future? What will it look like in the future? Will it really change? What is going to change? Remote working, working from home, youngsters, all of these tensions. What on earth will really change in capitalism in the future? So we're going to be talking about that. Second aspect, this was related to the situation that we have here in France. Can we really leap back? Can we become as vital as we were 1 or 2 decades ago. It's nothing to do with who's in power in the government. It's to do with what's happened in the last 20 years. And we always refer to industrialization, but this will be the purpose, the content of my second question. So I would just like to say that we have great ambitions. We want to push, stimulate all candidates, male and female, who want to run for president here in France. We want them to commit to 10 key subjects. So we need a framework for that. And that is why we decided that before we start our session, which is entitled What Did We Learn in 2020, starring Christine Lagarde, we thought it would be quite astute, and you don't understand why I'm saying astute, it would be astute to start with asking what capitalism will be in the future. So I'm going to quote 3 books which take a position, and we have Laurence Boone with us also. She's a chief economist at the OECD, so she has important things to say. We've got 3 books. I've got this one here. I've been told to stop speaking, but I'm going to go on. This is the first one, written by Patrick Artus, and he is going to talk about it in a minute. There's another book, Le pouvoir des instructions instructrices, written by Philippe Aguillon. And the third is a book which I have written. It's called La Grande Rupture, and it talks about many things, and I hope you'll read it. So 3 great books, working with partners. I worked with Alain Villemot on my book. These books are published by Odile Jacob, so they're easy to get hold of. And if you take all 3, you get a better price. There's some money off. So 3 books, great books. Go out and buy them. So we thought we would speak out in alphabetical order. Philippe is going to start. He's got 5 minutes. Then Patrick, then Laurence Boone, and then I'll be back at the mic again, Jean Hervé, Lorenzi, and then we'll really start the meeting. Well, thank you very much. Yes, I have published this book, Le pouvoir de la destruction créatrice, with Céline Antonin, who's with other colleagues. So you can check out my co-authors when you get the book. So creative destruction is a process by which new innovations are constantly making current practices obsolete. New innovations replace old existing things. But it's also a driver for growth. Growth is a very recent phenomenon, and we've only started to talk about global growth 200 years ago, of course, so then it's sped up with the steam engine, and so this creative destruction has been the driver of world growth. So this involves a contradiction. There are people who want to innovate and they hope to move forward. You innovate because you undertake research. A lot of people are engaged in innovation because they hope to make money out of it. But at the same time, because there is this creative destruction, and because today's innovations will be replaced in the future, if I innovated something yesterday, I'm earning money on it, and I am tempted to use that money to prevent new innovations. And this contradiction is at the very heart of capitalism. Schumpeter himself was very pessimistic about the future of capitalism because he thought that the very first innovators would become conglomerates, which would be opposed to new innovation. And so his pessimistic views turned out to be the truth. In fact, in our book, we explain that Schumpeter's pessimism must be replaced with optimistic combat. We can replace this system with inertia. And that means regulating capitalism. What does that involve? It means, first of all, processing this contradiction. How can I both give out money and also ensure that the money is used in a proper way? That's at the very heart of the debate today on patents, for example. Should we get rid of patents so that vaccines can be shared more widely and so that we can go into green innovation? I would just like to, because I've already used half of my time, I'm just going to talk about COVID. COVID has revealed many things. It's revealed the weaknesses of capitalism around the world. It's very interesting to see that these weaknesses are not the same in all countries. In the United States, COVID has highlighted, if this was necessary, the weakness of the American social model. A lot of people, because of COVID, lost their jobs. And by losing their jobs, they lost their health coverage at the very time when they needed it. And they fell into poverty. Nothing like that happened in European countries, particularly in Germany, the Scandinavian countries, or in France. Similarly, when you lose your job in the United States, you fall into precariousness. A lot of work has been carried out by several researchers that show that those people aged between around 50, who are the Hispanics who are not educated, well, their mortality rate went up drastically since the year 2000 because they have a lack of job security, and that has led these layers of population to take all kinds of drugs, antidepressants, to become obese, and their death rate has gone up much steeply. In Denmark, they've got flexi security, and that means that there have been no consequences on health, none on the taking of medication for mortality or heart disease. They have found a system which lives comfortably with this destructive creation. So the Scandinavians have found a way of making capitalism more inclusive and more protective. Europe, on the other hand, and the United States, in terms of innovation, the United States are dominated. The vaccines came from the United States principally. There's the messenger RNA. It was discovered in the Institute Pasteur, but it didn't happen. It happened in the United States because they have an innovation ecosystem. They've got their different national institutes for research and medication. They've got their BARDA, which in 1 year managed to mass produce these vaccines. And we here in France do not have the same ecosystem. So I am at the end of my time, almost finished here. Could we imagine a kind of capitalism that will combine the good aspects of both sides? I want innovative capitalism like in the States and a protective, inclusive capitalism as in Denmark. There are people who think that it's not possible, that the lack of protection in the United States is the price to be paid for innovation in the United States, and the lack of innovation in Europe is the price to be paid for protection. I disagree with that. And let me give you 3 quick examples. Very, very quickly. Competition. If I increase competition in the United States, that means that competition is not suited to the digital era. If I boost competition in the United States, that will boost innovation and make it more inclusive, and new entrants can turn up. There are many innovators, but because they haven't been educated, their innovations don't get through. I think there are many innovators, so I can boost innovation and I can make growth more inclusive. And I just want to finish by saying that Schumpeter was a pessimist, and he was wrong, because at the end of the day, there are businesses, there's the state, and there's civil society. That triangle is absolutely magical. This triangle means that creative destruction will continue, and everything will be greener and more inclusive in the future. Yes, moving straight along on the same theme, the book which I wrote with Marie-Paul does tie in with what Philippe has just said. I'm going to try and present a few things to you in a nutshell. 3 simple points. Contemporary capitalism is condemned, and I'm going to try and explain why. The second idea is to try and understand why it is ineffectual from an economical point of view. It's quite mysterious and it's worth thinking about. And the third thing is, do we have some kind of avenues for a future capitalism, tying in what Philippe said. So why is capitalism condemned to death? Well, I think it can be criticized on many fronts, and that's what's so impressive. You can criticize it from the left, the inequalities, sharing revenue, which is unfavorable to the employees, and tying in with what Philippe said, stagnation of purchasing power of the poorest Americans for the past 3 decades. But you can also make an economic criticism, quite seriously. Just remember Reagan's promises that they were going to reduce tax pressure, they were going to liberalize trade, generating more growth, more jobs. But for the past 30 years, we have seen less and less in productivity gain and less growth. We are not getting that what was promised with the contraction of the state since the 1980s. The third criticism is a liberal criticism, because capitalism is neoliberal. That's what they say, but it's not at all liberal. And I would echo what Philippe said there. It's a capitalism which works with revenue. There's revenue which is generated by businesses, real estate, monetary investments. And of course, if you want to criticize a system from many different angles, that means it's a fragile system. Added to that, there's the fact that defending this system is through very impressive economic strategies, public deficits, flooding the market with money, and that will lead us to the next financial crisis. And Jean-Hervé will give you the date of that any minute now. So this capitalism, is it going to die? Will it die in a few years' time? I think it will. Before going on to future avenues, I want to come back to a second point, which is also very important. It's weird. We have deregulated, we've brought salaries down, we have a very strong supply policy, yet we have this continual drop, this problem of technology and this ability to grow. There are four possible explanations for this. The first one is, of course, that which Philippe Aguillon's been talking about, the dominant positions, the sterilization of innovation by monopolies that are protecting themselves and not letting new people enter into the market. The second, which seems important to me, is the level of profitability for capital, or a company's own capital, 15% or 13.5% for the shareholders. That means there's very little scope for investment. Investments are reduced, and long-term investments are reduced to update profit by 20% in 20 years' time. There'll be absolutely nothing left. So we have the same yield, which is expected as when the figures were completely different. So I think very deeply that above and beyond these questions of ethic, the amazing concentration of patrimony that we are witnessing means that fewer people have access to capital to invest and to fund projects, to create their own businesses, and that is sterilizing growth. And I'm not sure that spending billions to go up to space with a few millionaires is the most efficient way of spending the public coffers. I agree with Philippe. What we have seen up until now is a very strong tendency in innovation to use innovation to create bad jobs and not to create good jobs. So we can't necessarily put innovation and good jobs hand in hand. When you go to online trade, for example, you are creating jobs for people who were just going to shuffle boxes around in a depot. So we haven't really created what we had in past industrial revolutions when jobs were uplifted. So, final point now. What kind of avenues do we have to explore for the future? I am convinced that this model of capitalism will gradually be extinguished for one or other of the reasons which we've already mentioned. So what about the future? In our book, we are recommending a shift towards liberalism, market economy where the state does intervene in an intelligent manner by giving motivation with tax policies and support policies. And I believe that each time we'll be able to have a liberal result to any problem. For climate, for example, the liberal solution would be the cost of CO2, and it would not be telling people how to travel around, eat, find accommodation. The neoliberal solution would be bonuses and negative points, etc. It's really important in the world of business. We have to think about this, about the profitability we are demanding from our capital. We should be happy enough with a bonus of 6% for shareholders. We should be happy with yield of 7 or 8% for company capital. So how do we bring down the yield of a company's capital? in order to manufacture growth and enhance distribution. It's not easy. We need to have different types of investors who are not in competition in terms of battling for the yield. That means a new class of investor, which could be specific to Europe, and we could dilute to the old shareholders by handing out shares to foundations or to employees. There are techniques which make it possible to reduce that yield. We have to fight against this different kind of passive revenue. When you talk about this passive revenue, this is one of the results of the monetary policy which is in place. It's passive revenue which comes from real estate, for example. Prices are exploding all over the world. 16% increase in the States, 11% increase in Germany in the space of 1 year. So this kind of passive revenue needs to be addressed. And the final point is a question of competency and skills. We can't just say that we want right jobs. We don't want good jobs. That's not enough. That begs the question of technology. We have to have the skills necessary to create the good jobs, and that is one of the key subjects that we're going to be facing here. So if you would like to enjoy capitalism as we know it today, hurry up, because it's soon going to be the very end of capitalism as we know it.
I think we should have Laurence Boone with us now. Laurence, you have 5 minutes. The interpreter is sorry, but we can't hear.
Puisqu'on associe souvent
The interpreter is sorry, but there's no way we can hear that. The sound is extremely bad.
C'est 3 points sur ce qu'on a vu avec cette crise et que la.
First of all, the first thing we saw was this crisis, in which global governance didn't look into. First of all, we had an issue with health. The reactions were a bit haphazard. No one was prepared for this pandemic. And it's still not organized, as almost 80% of the world population is still not vaccinated. Out of the 3,000 billion spent to support the economy, we still haven't been able to find the 50 billion that are necessary to vaccinate the population. The production chains in the world worked rather well, but the tensions at the time of recovery have been important. Only 2%, only 2 countries concentrate almost 80% of the production of semiconductors. The interpreter is sorry, but the sound is extremely bad. I'm doing my best. These are, there are issues in sectors where you have less qualified manpower. Lastly, we saw that our economies are highly dependent, not only health and energy, but now the digital world, which is a topic we hadn't been so much interested in the past. Now there are 2 options, that of Michel Houellebecq. We can continue and do worse. It's what Patrick said. And the other option is to note what corresponds to international governance and what should remain the field of national governance. And it's important to separate the two. Deregulation can be done at the national level and at the global level, which must look at health, at climate, at the digital world, even though it's not always done so. As far as health is concerned, nationally, we learned that in developed countries you had to have much less stressed services. It's true for the caregivers. That's one of the lessons. And the other lesson at international level, we learned that we must prepare, distribute, medical equipment, vaccines for all. And there we have a proof of something that is working, the regional globalization as we have at European level, because the 27 countries of Europe have had equivalent doses of vaccines. Imagine if all 27 countries had had to fight amongst each other. Now, for the climate, we talk a lot about climate. We've seen the geography of the past, the present, and the future. The interpreter is sorry, but we're losing the sound. There's something else that is not much said about climate. It's going to change deeply companies, territories, and the life of people. So what should we do? Well, first of all, advanced or developed countries must comply with their financial commitment and deliver what they have promised to the southern countries. Then, as Jean-Hervé told you, they must talk at international level about a better coordination. It's what was discussed by the G20. They were talking about a good cooperation, but we know there are many risks. And this is where the national level must support the international level. In terms of nuclear power plants, with the reduction in the nuclear power, we are losing jobs, and we have to see how we can shift these jobs. We must also, investment in clean transportation must be done at the same time. And I will finish with the digital aspect. The equipment of territories has a lot of challenges to manage. First of all, there's digital security, and we all know that it's very important, especially in WTO. Philippe mentioned competition. You all mentioned competition. We must avoid major companies eating up the little ones. And we must also avoid the little ones not abiding by the competition laws. And the large multinational companies must be properly taxed. Because we know that they're all trying to optimize this taxation. And yesterday, 130 countries agreed to tax the companies properly where they had to. Well, Laurent, sorry, you'll have to finish at that. The interpreter is very sorry, but we couldn't hear what was being said. So, says Jean-Hervé, I wrote a book with Alain Vilbin. I don't know if he's here, but I would like to thank him. This book, at Odile Jacobs' edition, is called The Great Divide, Reconciling Jacobs and Schumpeter. Second observation, in order to present the thesis and the topic of that book in a few words. 3 words starting with an R. R as in rupture, and I agree with Patrick. It's difficult to set the exact date of the rupture with capitalism, but this world has approached several transitions at the same time: demographic, digital, ecological, social, with inequalities. And the specificity of these 4 transitions is that today we neither have the instruments nor the concepts that would enable us to solve these issues and these transitions, which means that by nature we feel that the answers given to that will take us to another world that will be a new version of capitalism. second R is for reconciling. Many economists feel they have this privilege of being focused very often on either demand, support, the state. This is the Keynesian, the simplified Keynesian vision, and the other aspect being the entrepreneurial aspect that gives innovation a major role, and that would be Schumpeter's vision. But when you look at things closer, you realize that things are much more complicated. And what this book tried to highlight is that you have to find a balance between the three elements, supply, demand, and innovation. With one thing that Patrick and Philippe have mentioned, in fact, you almost mentioned it when we say Amazon is great, they're building a storage place, meaning 1,000 jobs. Yes, but there are 1,000 jobs that are much less qualified than the previous ones, the ones that they're replacing. So, okay, there's real innovations that are great for mankind, as you said, RNA, Philippe, but there are others that mean that the job that we all do, we try and replace the workers. When you go to an airport, you go to a store, you do the job of the cashier or the hostess, and this is deteriorating some jobs. Based on that, and as Mrs. Lagarde is not here yet, she's coming. She's about to arrive. Okay, but this gives me an extra minute. This book is based on a modeling which is that of Kaldor. You might remember the ability to give a link between supply and demand, to which you add innovation. And he starts from the idea that new capitalism will be based on 6 new distributions. Obviously, if I may mention one or two, something that has been the concern of economists, the distribution between salary and profit, the distribution between generations. The people from my generation were able to buy a house, for example. Youngsters can no longer do that, so this is a real issue. And the third thing, and I'll finish with that, so that will be half the distributions, the distribution between innovations. They can be either streamlining innovations or development. So either it gives you better quality jobs or it doesn't. And this distribution can be covered by a bonus or the reverse, as Tirol has suggested. And the other distributions, which I have no time to develop on, you will find them in the book that you're all going to go and get.